Today I have a very interesting person. His name's Tyler Boyd. He works in the McMinn County school system, and he's the author of 3 books. 3 of them are both about the local history that you may or may not have heard about. It's going to be a really great show. Before people would really bounce.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Are you originally from? You talk with a little bit of a South Carolina accent.
I'm born and raised in Athens, Tennessee.
Born and raised in Athens, Tennessee. Are you in your 40s yet?
Not quite. 36.
36.
Yeah.
Did you go to Athens High School?
Well, Athens City Schools for K through 8 and McMinn County High School for high school.
You like living in Athens?
Oh yeah. It really is a friendly city, despite what some people may say. So it really is.
Is it? Do you think that when you live in Athens, do you think is Cleveland as the big city, or do you think the big city is Knoxville or Chattanooga?
The big cities definitely Knoxville, Chattanooga. I think Knoxville more so because of certain amenities. But Cleveland is sort of like a in between, They have some stuff that Athens would like to have. We're not quite big enough, And we can have a shorter drive to come here to get some of the stuff. But if you have something that Cleveland doesn't have, you just got to, suck it up and go up to Knoxville or go all the way down to Chattanooga. So.
How long does it take you to get to Knoxville from your house?
Well, if you're going to go to Turkey Creek, maybe it's about, 40 minutes. If you're going to go to anything downtown Knoxville, UT campus, it's going to be about an hour.
So 40 minutes you can be at Turkey Creek. Mm-hmm. And what about to the Riverwalk in Chattanooga?
That's going to be close to an hour.
Is that right? So you're actually closer to Knoxville. I didn't really realize that. I guess that's right.
Yeah, they say Athens is equidistant between Knoxville and Chattanooga, but it kind of depends on which parts of town you're going to in Knoxville and Chattanooga, and which part of Athens you live in. I'm in North Athens, so
right.
Kind of
that makes a difference.
Shortens it. Yeah.
Is that Barnor? Let's see. Barnor exit?
Well, Von Orr is it's Mount Verde exit. Yeah,
Mount
exit 52.
Verde exit,
yeah, Von Orr is in Monroe County. Yeah.
So Matt, you live closer to Mount Verde exit.
Yes.
You live west of 75 or east?
That would be east.
East.
Yep.
Well, so you've written 3 books. Did you aspire to be an author?
I did not. This is something that actually happened sort of just out of nowhere when I was close to my 30th birthday. I had gone to help my cousin, Dr. Tyler Forrest, who's now the president of Tennessee Wesleyan University.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. He had moving into Harry T. Burn Jr.'s home, and he was giving some stuff to other members of the family, including a fainting couch, kind of like what Sigmund Freud had his his clients relax on when he talked to them. He said, well, this belonged to Harry T. Burn's mother, Feb Burn, of course, famous for writing her son a letter to asking him to vote for women's suffrage. He said, I'm going to give this to your mom and your aunts. And they decided to put it up at Crescent Sock Company, majority female-owned business in Iota. So he's going through all of Harry T. Burn Jr. stuff in the house, and I thought, God, there's so much history in there, and now he's gone, and that generation is gone, and someone's got to step up and preserve this history. And then I just joked to myself, how about I do a book about Harry T. Burn? And I thought, no. But then I got to digging around, and I started researching this book on May 11th of 2017, and I got it out in August of 2019. And I enjoyed it so much, I decided I wanted to keep doing books, and not just books, but local history books, and it seems biographies of people who you may have heard of in passing. You may have seen them in a footnote somewhere in a bigger history book, but they really deserve to have their full story told.
Isn't it something to have your story told, no matter what the story is? Mm-hmm. People want to have their story told. Back to Iota, is that sock company still in business?
Yes, 121 years in running.
Golly, I was up there here a while back, And it looked kind of desolate, but it's still operating?
Yes, the town is desolate, and the old mill, that's the red brick building, that does look desolate, but the current mill in white, it's in pretty good shape, and they've had their struggles, but they're the oldest continuously operating family-owned hosiery mill in the entire country.
Golly.
Got about
Wonder how many they employ.
a little under 100.
Are they mostly from right around in there?
There's a lot from Monroe County, a lot from Meigs County, of course McMinn, not so much Bradley, I don't think, but yeah, so they're...
The busiest place there's a convenience store.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right off the interstate.
Right
yeah,
off the main road.
Used to be a Hess, and then I think Pilot bought it out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it now they got a depot there.
Oh yes,
A
I
nice,
love the
pretty
depot.
nice depot.
Yes,
Was it a busy town at one time?
it was. It was a very industrious town. If you look at some articles from the 1950s and 60s, it was one of the most industry-heavy towns as far as like everyone that worked there was working either at Crescent, or they're working at the Niota Textile Mill, or they're working at Daco, which does chemicals, and there was the Wycliffe Corporation, and a lot of others I'm not remembering, but there were all sorts of agricultural-based businesses, industries there, grocery stores, hair salon.
Golly. Yeah, they've got some really, you can tell it was a town.
And that depot is the heart of that town, and I'm so glad it's been preserved because it's pre-Civil War. It's an antebellum depot, and it's seen most of the town's history.
Is antebellum mean pre-Civil War?
As far as I know, yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I remember saying that, or maybe that era.
It's just a way to. It's not meant
Yeah.
to specify any sort of, longing for those days. It's just
No.
a good way to say pre-Civil
Yeah.
War and after the founding fathers were gone. Yeah.
Well, the road in front of the depot is really wide. Mm-hmm. And they have a bank there. I don't know if the bank's still operating.
No, sadly, there's no banks left. That was the last bank actually to close was People's Bank, which is on Wilson
Right.
Street, Highway 11. Before that, it was the First Tennessee. They're the ones that closed it because they bought out Capital Bank, who bought out Greene County Bank, who bought out Bank of Niota / Bank of Athens. And when that bank closed, I think that was maybe in early 2019, late 2018, the city started thinking about, hey, we might move in there and make City Hall. Now they're finally doing it. They're going to move City Hall into that bank building on the corner, and then the depot will be completely just for special events.
Is the depot now where City Hall is?
Yes, it's been there about 40-ish years, I think.
What would they have in City Hall in Niota? I mean, it's small, right?
Mostly water. That's the biggest
I
thing. They
guess,
have their
yeah.
own water, and they have a small police force. They have a really good fire department, and they maintain, the park that's back behind the depot, and they maintain the streets.
It's a
nothing
nice
major.
park.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a small staff. They do a good job. So
People don't realize that Niota is how famous Harry Burns was from there, because he had the deciding vote for allowing women to vote, which was the era was called suffrage.
yes.
I don't know why they get that name, but it was called, I guess, because women suffered not to vote or something.
Yeah, that's the joke. Yeah.
And so that was your great grandfather,
great granduncle.
great granduncle.
My great grandfather was his younger brother. He was the oldest of 4 kids. Harry was. And yeah, it's just an amazing story. I mean, Harry's just this oldest of 4 kids in a pretty, upper middle class family, average family in Niota, and then he finds himself in his first term in Nashville voting on something that changed the country forever.
And my understanding is that he was going to vote against it,
That's right.
and his mother sent him a card, and it arrived the morning before the vote,
The morning of the vote.
the morning of the vote.
Perfect timing.
And she basically said, I want you to vote for this, basically,
Yes.
right?
It was not admonishing or browbeating, but it was still advised to an adult child, And that letter was written over the weekend of Friday, August 13th through Sunday, August 15th. And that's funny because of the whole Friday the 13th bad luck thing.
Yeah.
But there was a speech made by a senator, state senator, that represented McMinn, Bradley, Roane, and Anderson counties. Now think about how that doesn't make any sense. Just like now they've redone it, and Adam Lowe has
Yeah.
McMinn, Bradley, Meigs, and Ray. He made a speech in the state senate one of the few people in the Senate against suffrage. And he said all sorts of things that would get him canceled today. He's like, if we have this, we're going to have, petticoat government, things like that. So, and he was Harry's mentor because he was from Athens, and he kind of helped Harry get into politics, helped knock on doors for him, put in a good word for him. And so when she read that in the paper, she was offended, and she got word that Harry might be influenced, not morally, but politically by Senator Candler. So she wrote that letter, just regular old, pencil, and ran out of ink actually, and on just regular paper. It wasn't a 8.5 by 11, maybe like something like this big.
Yeah.
And my great-grandfather, Jack Byrne, the second oldest child, and there were 2 girls. One had died by then, sadly. On Monday, she said, Jack, take this into town. Into town, it's like a mile away, So now it's in the city limits. Now at a depot, and where the mailbox was, mail this to your brother. And back then, you could just put down Honorable Harry T. Byrne, Nashville, Tennessee State Capitol. No street number, no street name, no zip code. And that letter, believe it or not, got from now to Tennessee by train from Monday, August 16th. By Wednesday, August 18th, it got to Nashville and got delivered to Harry by a House page in the legislature before they convened within 48 hours.
You couldn't do that today with all our modern technology.
No way.
They were more efficient back then.
Exactly.
Probably.
And the train's going over the Cumberland Mountains, so it's
What
it's
year?
remarkable. 1920. Yeah, we just had a
1920.
celebration for 100 years 3 years ago. So, yeah.
Not that bit long in the scheme of things.
Oh.
Before the Depression.
I mean, there are people alive today that aren't terribly old that they could tell you, yeah, my mom couldn't vote till she was middle age. That's just crazy to think, but if not older, maybe not even elderly age, So.
And now we can't even get more than 5 or 10% of the population to even vote.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Turnout is pretty low, especially if it's not presidential election year, So,
Right.
yeah.
So in writing this book, what do you teach in Athens?
Mostly history.
So had you had some experience in writing?
Not to this extent. I got better at writing when I got into teaching and, judging writing and things like that. But as far as writing narrative nonfiction, and it's different than when you write in college. You're writing an academic paper and you're breaking the fourth wall all the time. You're having to talk about the literature you used and the biases reflected in your sources and things like that. And that's fine for a college professor audience, but I wanted to write something for a general audience, narrative nonfiction. Now, of course, I know David McCullough, but still, that I had to really study up on. I read some other biographies of other figures, and I thought it'd be really good if I read biographies of dead men, because to see, compared to someone living and compared to women, and this is obviously a story, about women voting, how are biographies of these long deceased men written? And I read some books on how to be a better nonfiction writer and things like that, and it helped me out a lot. It really did.
So it's not just telling the story. There's a lot in the writing and how somebody's going to read it and all that stuff.
Yeah, so you've got some of the driest material you can imagine, but it's essential to the story, to the overall argument that a politician like Harry might be making. And you have to make that understandable, not in a condescending way, but make it understandable to a general audience. And you have to make it interesting, and you can't take too long or you'll lose them. And sometimes it can be long-winded, but I've really got to just chop things down to the bare essentials, and that's a challenge. So
that means taking words out, not because you want to, but then you got also the problem of trying to make the book thick enough to where people think it's got something in it, but yet have this stuff in it condensed to where they don't lose their too many adjectives or something.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get it? Who did the binding?
Well, this first book, Tennessee Takes and Harry T. Byrne, this was published by Arcadia Publishing, and they have an imprint called the History Press, and they're located in Charleston, South Carolina, and they actually Columbia. It's sort of both cities, and they're the biggest publisher of local and regional history in the country. They say regional in case you have a book about, Chattanooga, you can have North Georgia, so that's fine. And Full service, you don't pay anything except for the actual books. You get a good discount, and they do everything for you. They do the editing, typesetting, pagination, cover design, Library of Congress registration, ISBN number, marketing to an extent, all that kind of stuff. And they were really good to use. And History Press is more of their text imprint, whereas Arcadia Publishing is their pictorial history imprint. If you ever go into Barnes & Noble or Books A Million and you see those books with the sepia tone cover, 127 pages like their standard.
Yeah.
That's Images of America. That's a huge selling brand for them all over the country. But I went with History Press because this has more, actual words, not so much pictorial history. But they're a really good press to use.
So have you had a lot of success? And how many people would be interested in Harry Burns unless you lived around here?
Well, that's the thing. I wrote this for an audience that wasn't just local. Local people will recognize some places, but I wrote about this where if you read this, if you're in California, or you're in Boston, or you're in Miami, you're really going to enjoy this because I show the impact he had not just in Tennessee but also nationally. And the Tennessee focus is more so for the people that live around here. But I think anybody could really enjoy this story because you've got, just like I said, just an ordinary person in local government, state government that's so ignored compared to national politics. You can see the difference that they make. And it's been successful. I've been very grateful. I've sold almost 900 copies myself.
Golly.
And I got
900.
lucky because in 2019, when the state kicked off their 19th Amendment celebrations, they were going to lead up to August 2020. Of course, that was, sort of muted because of the pandemic, but we still had some events, just kind of toned down. But in 2019, free publicity, I couldn't have asked for anything better because it's all over the news. Anniversary's coming up. Let's talk to the Harry Burns family. So I sold about 900 myself, and then based on royalty checks, that's kind of hard to tell. But I think the publishers probably sold through booksellers or through the website. And Amazon's also a bookseller. That's just, people don't think about that. It's just if you go into Barnes & Noble and buy a book, or if you buy it from Amazon, my royalty's the same. I'd say there's well over 1,000 in print. So I'm grateful for that. It's been pretty successful. And I've had some people out of state. Yeah.
Even just to get keep from having to give it to family and friends is a big deal.
Oh, yeah. I had a rule where if you're a descendant of Harry T. Burns' mom, you got a free copy. Otherwise, you had to pay. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, after he came back and voted different than his mentor, I guess you're saying, did he run for office the next election?
Yes, he had a tough re-election campaign. See, he was thinking, well, I'll vote against this because it's not going to pass and it's going to make the voters mad, so why not just vote to table it? But then when they actually had to have the vote, he voted yes. Well, it almost cost him his career because McMinn County was really split on this issue. I would say, based on the research I did, telegrams and other articles, a slight majority were against it, maybe 55-45, and you've got some wiggle room there because if it passes, women can vote for me and save me. Right. And that's what happened. And he credited the Republican and Democratic women in McMinn County for helping him get reelected because the party leaders in the McMinn Republican Party, not the state party, the national, they were for it, but the McMinn County local Republicans were against it, and the local Democrats didn't like it either, but the women in both parties worked against the party leaders and campaigned for him all over the county. And he won re-election by about 7%, which for a Republican in McMinn County is not good. They weren't voting on, red versus blue. They were voting on this issue alone. And he thankfully survived it and got to serve a second term in the House. And then, thankfully, he walked away from it for a while. He didn't stay in there until he, keeled over.
So he was ready to get out by then.
Yes.
He just wanted to get in there one more time to prove that he did to himself that he had done the right thing.
Absolutely, yeah. He got vindicated by his voters in his county, McMinn County.
Now, did I see an interview from him where he said he was glad he voted that way, or did I dream that?
He did. He said it many times. The one you're probably thinking of is 1970, the 50-year anniversary for suffrage. He's outlived almost all the legislators. There's one guy actually outlived him, lived to be almost 100, but that guy kind of just became sort of reclusive. But Harry was the guy. He's still out there, and he's the one they're going to talk to about suffrage. And WBIR in Knoxville interviewed him, And he said, I just love the way he talked. He's like, I've been given credit, of course, properly so, for having cast a deciding vote that gave women the right to vote. So he said, I'm not the father of women's suffrage. I wouldn't say that, but I did play a role here. And he said, I've never regretted it from day one. I'm glad I listened to my mother. And he also said, I knew it wasn't going to be a panacea, a cure-all, like all the suffrage, hardcore suffragists thought it would be. I also knew it wouldn't be a disaster like the anti-suffragists said. It was somewhere in the middle, because it wasn't just about women voting as one block. You just have a whole bunch of new voters who are going to be voting just like men on a bunch of different issues, and things happened after that. You know, we got in World War II and Vietnam, a lot of other things happened. You can blame that on men and women voters now.
That's right. Now
there
you
you
can
go.
blame both.
So, yeah.
They say they got women to the right to vote, so they could be blamed too for the wrong decision.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, that could be one way to put it.
Now the other book, Nellie Kenyon.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that one.
Oh, Nellie was.
Go ahead.
Nellie was one of my favorite people. I knew she deserved a life story whenever I found out more about her. Believe it or not, by no intention, pure coincidence, she is in this book. I told you earlier I have to cut words out. Mm-hmm. I quoted her in this book because she's the one that interviewed Harry T. Burns' mother.
Wasn't she the reporter at the time that reported and actually interviewed his mother? Is that right?
Yes, that's how I got to know
Yeah.
her. And I quoted her in the text of my first book because she described the Harry T. Burns homestead so well, and she interviewed my great-great-grandmother and got a lot of information I couldn't get, because when I'm doing this research in 2017, everyone that knows Fed Burn has died.
Yeah.
And I remembered her name, and then I saw her in another book. Again, going to the bookstore, open up a Images of America book about the Scopes trial, and I see Nellie's picture in there. I say, hey, there's Nellie, only woman there at the Scopes trial. And then I learned she did some more stuff. I saw the names like Jimmy Hoffa and Al Capone and John F. Kennedy, and my eyes, oh, that's interesting. And sure enough, she left all of her personal papers, letters, correspondences, articles, photographs, certificates at the UT Knoxville Library. And I knew there was another biography in the making. And someone said she's sort of like the Forrest Gump of journalists.
Because she was at the Scopes trial.
Yes, the only woman covering the trial.
And I think she was at the mobster's trial in Chattanooga. Is that right?
Jimmy Hoffa.
Jimmy Hoffa's.
Even then, 40 years later, still the only woman in the courtroom. Yeah.
How did she get to be in the courtroom? I guess that's what.
Well, technically, in the Scopes trial, she wasn't in the courtroom covering it. And that's the one time I'm glad she was treated differently as a woman, because her male colleagues were in there covering what was said by Darrow and Bryan and giving their editorials, their opinions on religion and science. She's sent early. She gets press pass number 1. I have a picture of that in the book, because she's going to cover how Ray County and Dayton prepared for this trial. And that's so overlooked, because all you ever hear about is Clarence Darrow, William James Bryan, and the celebrities everyone's so starstruck by, and then all the other interesting characters like John Randolph Neal, who helped with the defense, and Sue K. Hicks, a boy named Sue. Mm-hmm. He's also in this one. He was helping the prosecution. And H.L. Mencken, sort of the political satirist of the time, a very acid tongue, he was there. They all got overshadowed by Darrow and Bryan. So she's there talking to Scopes, Scopes' father. Charles Darwin had a great-great-great-nephew, I think, about my relation to Harry T. Burns, maybe a little farther, living in Dayton. Who would have thought Charles Darwin had a relative living there? He's like, I'm not going to the trial, I'm too busy with my work. And she talked to all these the modern day equivalent of food truck vendors who were going to set up all these food trucks outside the Dayton courthouse and sell all these monkey toys. People rented out their spare bedrooms before there was an Airbnb, because people were going to come in to watch the trial. Farmers would let people park their cars and their airplanes on their fields. They were expecting truly a Woodstock-type crowd. And it wasn't a bust. It was a big deal, but they were expecting an enormous crowd. And
were they expecting more than they got?
Exactly, yeah.
What would you rate it as far as? Of course, anybody that had a vacant spot would have been, wouldn't have compared probably. Was the Scopes monkey trial, was that put on?
Yes, she's the one that found that out too. I don't know how it's taught other places, but I can do a little bit of acting here if I may. But let's say how this is taught in California. Well, there's this poor Scopes fella. He's just a science teacher, and he's trying to teach the kids about evolution, this scientific theory, and then the police barge into the classroom and put the cuffs on him, and he can't get a lawyer, poor fella. And then Clarence Darrow comes in, I'll work for you pro bono. And then William James Bryan comes in, who, 3-time failed presidential candidate. I'll come help the DA prosecute this heathen. And all of a sudden it turns into this, no, not what happened. Not even close to what happened. Scopes was asked to say he taught evolution because they needed a trial to test the Butler Act. The Butler Act banned teaching that man descends from a lower order of animals. And with a lot of these laws, and I learned this doing these books, a lot of these laws that passed in Nashville, at least back in those days, they weren't sure if they were going to hold up with the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court. So they decided, let's have a test case. Let's go ahead and get someone to prosecute or to indict, whatever. And then if it's thrown out, we don't have to waste all the state's resources implementing the law. So she went there and she talked to the drugstore conspirators. Sadly, the pharmacy's gone, but there's a marker where it used to be in Dayton, Robinson's Pharmacy. F.E. Robinson, the school board chairman, who was a pharmacist. Walter White, not that Walter White. Walter White, the school board superintendent and quite a slick politician. And the true brainchild, George Rapplier, a local businessman who worked, I think, for the some sort of iron and coal company there. They wanted publicity for Dayton. Even in the Roaring '20s, Dayton had some struggles, and they really wanted to put themselves on the map. They said, let's beat Chattanooga to this. Let's get this trial here. So they wrote to the ACLU on a napkin and a telegram and said, we have a teacher here who says he taught evolution, and he's going to be indicted. And then they got a local grand jury to indict him. And the ACLU bought a hook, line, and sinker, sent Clarence Darrow in, and then all of a sudden Brian comes in, then you have your trial. It was all cooked up in a pharmacy. And she found that out before the trial even happened, but her article about that didn't get a lot of play because everyone's reading all the articles about Darrow and Brian arguing over politics and religion and science, So, yeah, her role in that trial is very overlooked.
So do you think she exposed it?
Yes, she's the one that truly broke that open, but no one really realized at the time.
Just through investigative journalism?
Yes.
So she was doing something back then that real investigative journalism, something we don't have today.
Absolutely. She was an excellent investigative
Geraldo
journalist.
Rivera type stuff.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, she didn't ever have an empty vault. But yeah, she definitely dug real deep, and she really just gave 110% to everything she did in her work.
And she was from Nashville?
Chattanooga, actually. Yeah,
Is that right?
Born in Kentucky, but her family settled in Chattanooga when she was an infant. So she's raised in Chattanooga, worked for the Chattanooga News, and then when they got bought out, she went to the Nashville Tennessean before it was just called the Tennessean. So her career is sort of a tale of two careers, the Chattanooga years and the Nashville years. And they're equally great, but clearly the world was really changing when she went to Nashville. A lot had happened. So
how was it different when she got to Nashville? I mean, what year did you think she moved to Nashville?
She moved in 1940.
So it was different in the sense of
we're almost at another world war.
Oh.
The Depression, depending on how you look at it, war got out of the Depression, whatever, that's about to happen.
Yeah.
And by this time, her parents have passed on, and she's in totally a whole new phase of life, having to start over in a whole new city, and there's all these new issues. So instead of covering things like women voting, women can vote now. Instead of covering the Scopes trial, that whole thing, that law eventually got overturned. And then when she gets there, she's covering war stories, and there's more changes coming. She's covering the temporary repeal of the poll tax. Now, it eventually didn't become permanent till the 50s, but in the 40s, they had a temporary repeal. But that kind of thing would have never even got, to a floor vote in the 1920s and 1930s. And then she's covering some desegregation stories, which will have never happened.
Which was just starting to brew.
Yes. Yeah, so she's covering a lot of those things. And there's also her crowning achievement, which is the Jimmy Hoffa trials. And
back in Chattanooga.
well, actually, there were two trials. There was a trial in Nashville where there was a mistrial, and then the second trial, which I call her homecoming. She got to go back to Chattanooga just for work and see him finally convicted because they got to change the venue. And that was a really, really icing, on the top of cherry on the top of her career. So worked out great.
She could have really written her own biography, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So this book here is the only book talking about Nellie Kenyon, which is one of the most successful people Chattanooga's had.
Exactly. Yes, and I would say Nashville too, but really more so Chattanooga since she grew up there. But yeah, that is her. I guess I got in touch with her niece, or her great niece. I have to make sure I get permission. I say, can I call this the authorized biography? If she says yes, then yeah, because she never had any kids and never got married. So yeah, it's the authorized biography, and it's just a great way to learn a lot of episodes in Tennessee and U.S. history through the eyes of a great journalist who was impartial, fair, and didn't play favorites, didn't give softball questions to her friends, and didn't give, gotcha questions to her people she didn't really like. She was just excellent all around. So.
And she was that was in the era where women couldn't even really be journalists, right?
If they were bottom of the totem pole. They weren't going to be an editor, or they weren't going to be a publisher, or they weren't going to have any sort of authority other than just, this is what we're sending you to do. And I think she knew that, and that's unfortunate. But I truly think, though, if she lived today, she would still want to be just a reporter out there or doing stuff. She would have been miserable as the editor in the office. I mean, she could have been like an editor that goes out and does work themselves, which I guess would happen if your paper's really strapped for labor. But yeah, she loved what she did being out there in the field, for sure.
When you write these, do you feel like you really know what they're doing about any situation after you've done all this research? I mean, do you really get to know the person?
You do get to know them. I couldn't get in their mind for everything, but I say most things. It was more difficult for her because, honestly, I did not know, just to give you an idea, I did not know her politics until I found a thesis. There was a lady who wrote, I'm trying to remember her name. She went to UT Knoxville to get her PhD in her middle age. Adamson, that's it, June Adamson. And she interviewed Nellie Kenyon because she wanted to do a thesis on all these women in newspaper journalism. And there's only like 5 of them because there weren't that many, And that's when she found out that after Nellie retired in 1970, she worked for the John J. Hooker Jr. campaign for governor. That's how I found out her politics. And she was just so, impartial. So it would have been tough to figure out how she thought on certain issues. But as far as how she would approach a story, I can tell you exactly how she would do that. With Harry, it was easier because it's my family. I'm not saying there's sort of intuition, but a lot of the Byrne family, does think alike, and he was, close with my grandfather and my uncle, and had the same upbringing, same values, and he left behind a lot of stuff too. But with her stuff, it's just, we got this letter from my editor, usually people praising her work, which is, well deserved. Photographs, her articles, but with him, he left behind personal letters talking about all sorts of issues. And that really helped put me into his mind where I could probably tell you what he'd think about almost anything today. So just my opinion, but still, that's what I think. I got to know him pretty well. So.
You have to go to like the library and the historical branches and look through newspaper. I mean, this like hours. How many hours would you say you spent on this book? She looks so familiar to me, doesn't she? She looks like an East Tennessee woman when I was growing up, if there ever was one.
Absolutely. She's about 5 feet tall, too. So that book, I got lucky.
I bet she had good penmanship, wouldn't you say?
Journalists, they kind of scribble, how it is. But I never really saw one of her formal letters. But I got lucky on that book because I started doing the real meat of the work right when the lockdowns happened. So that helped me out a lot. But this one was the true labor of love. You've got to travel, to local libraries. You've got to go to local historical societies. You may have to make a trip to the State Library in Nashville, maybe to UT's library. You've got to look on newspapers.com for all the Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville papers. We're spoiled. We can put in Control-F search, put in Burn, hope you don't find a fire. Put in Kenyon, easier to find her.
Yeah.
And also, another thing that's tough, you've got to find people that knew them. And with these people that have been gone this long, him 1977, her 1982, the people that knew them as contemporaries, not, oh yeah, I was a little kid and he gave me an ice cream. That's nice, but I want to know someone who knew him as a contemporary. You got to get on it. And I had to, thankfully not go too far away, but I found some of Harry T. Burns' friends, and I tracked down 2 people on the telephone who worked with Nellie. They were just starting out in journalism, right when she was retiring. And we're talking 50 plus years ago. And that's one of the most fun parts of this, is you get to talk to the people who knew them, knew the person you're writing about, and you might get to become friends with them and learn a lot from them. But that's also part of the process, is not just finding primary sources as far as a newspaper article or a letter or a court record or a government record, finding someone who knew them and they could say for sure, Harry wouldn't have done this, Harry wouldn't have liked that, or Nellie would love this, and that's to me almost as good as finding the person themselves on camera, which with Harry we have, with her unfortunately we do not. So,
But just think about this. You spend hours going to somewhere to meet somebody, to talk about them, knowing you may not get any money at all.
yeah.
It may cost you. Having these published, isn't it like $10,000 or some kind of a minimum charge or something?
Thankfully not that much. Yeah.
5?
Yeah. Well,
8?
the Harry T. Burn book was more expensive, but it was also more profitable. But with the full service on this publisher, I just had to buy the books at 50% discount, and then when you sell half of it, you made your money back. So I had a pretty good profit on this one. That was a little tougher. I use a great publisher in Chattanooga, Walden House Publishers. They do charge a fee for a lot of the work that they do. Not terrible, but harder to break even on that one. But I really feel like that one was worth it. And I do think this next one will be a really big hit. So.
Now, when you say break even, you're not talking about your time, because that's free, I guess,
Yeah,
right?
whenever I have the time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like you're just talking hard cost as far as editing and stuff. If you
Yes.
figured your time in, you're in the hole, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
sure.
but that's your hobby.
Yes, I really enjoy
So
it.
you no regrets on doing all of that.
Oh no, I've learned so many skills, made so many connections, and learned a lot from
Say you
people,
drive
so.
to Nashville and you're sitting in some historical library for 5 hours a day, and you have to get a room at the Holiday Inn to come back to Cleveland the next day. Was there days like that?
Yeah. Sometimes I'm lucky I get to use my points you add up, for the IHG. That helps out a lot for sure. But you got to really put in that time, and sometimes it's a bust. Sometimes you find something that's great. You go, I got to stay longer, But when you have the end product in your hand, it's really worth it. I think it's something you're really proud of. So, and it inspires you to do more, and you learn a lot more along the way.
So now you've got one, and now you got 2, and now you've got a website that has published where you can purchase the books, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, do you think you're an author?
Oh yeah, I'm an author. It's not my primary occupation, but still, it's I guess you could call it my side hustle. I don't really like that word, but side hustle, yeah, you can call it that, yeah. So.
I guess it's better than drinking or running around with wild women.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that's the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
This is the late 20s.
Oh, both of these books really, their lifespans are similar. These
Yeah.
books are 1920s really to the 1970s.
I see.
But
Yeah.
his defining moment was the 20s.
And what would hers have been?
There's
Too many?
There are 2. Really, you got Scopes in 1925, you got Hoffa in the 1960s. And again, you learn things along the way. I had no idea until I did her book that Jimmy Hoffa was tried and convicted in Tennessee. I mean, why would I have known that unless someone taught me that?
I
But
saw
he
it in an
was.
article several months ago, and I had no idea. But her first defining moment would have been late 20s.
Yeah, Scopes trial.
That's when.
yes.
So these are set in that era.
Mm-hmm.
History of Chattanooga, and these 2 books are actually connected. Even though she was living in Chattanooga, she was the reporter that did an article about his wife.
His mother, yes.
His mother.
Fed Burn, yes.
Yeah, so-
and also, she was a suffragist herself. You know, she was
Oh, I
supporting
see,
women
yeah.
voting, and her mom was too before 1920, so it worked out really well like that.
So now, is this third book connected to that in any way?
Yes, more so. The Biggs Machine's connected more so to Harry T. Byrne, but it does have a Nellie connection.
So, your next book is called The Biggs Machine, and I know about that much about that era. From Frank Lowry I had here and Mr. Lee, and they were in the GGL or Good Government League, and they would meet at Grassy Creek. No, would meet at Greasy Creek.
Greasy Creek.
Greasy Creek, and that's all I know.
There is a Grassy Creek, but yeah, Greasy Creek's where they met. When
Yeah.
they were still in secret, then they came out. You know, they had to eventually organize formally. But
What's the connection between the two?
I found out about this because Harry T. Byrne was in the state Senate. I told you he left politics, and he came back in the state Senate in 1948, representing McMinn, Monroe, Bradley, and Polk counties. And during his the year he was elected is the year Birch Biggs was overthrown, and the Good Government League won. And then in
All right, now so go back to that. So say it again.
the year that Harry T. Byrne was elected to the state Senate in 1948 is the same year that Birch Biggs was overthrown by the Good Government League.
So they won the election.
And then in 1950, the Good Government League, they had some growing pains. I hate
Was the
to
Good
say.
Government? Explain the Good Government League.
The Good Government League was a bipartisan group of Polk County citizens, some veterans, some non-veterans, from all different walks of life, farmers, copper miners, mountain folks, who were tired of the corruption in Polk County, and Democrats and Republicans got together and formed a ticket and said, because the Battle of Athens proved that this election can be won, these machines can be defeated, we're going to do the same thing down here. And they defeated Birch Biggs.
Now, so this is so from the time Harry Burns, there was the Battle of Athens, and then they defeated the Good Government League, which was I guess you would say, a third party.
Yeah, so they were independents on the
Independent.
ballot, yeah.
Overthrew Biggs due to the Athens.
Yeah, they
The
were
War
inspired
of
by-
Athens.
Yes. The Battle of Athens just proves that McMinn County takes voting very seriously. Women can vote, and your vote will be counted as cast. But
Well,
it
that's true.
inspired the Good Government League in Polk County because
That's interesting.
the GI Nonpartisan League in McMinn County, after they won, they sort of formed an unofficial party or organization called the Good Government League, just a generic name. And that didn't last very long. They eventually broke up, and McMinn County went back to being Republican like it had been, legitimately Republican. But with Polk County, the Good Government League formed. It was a lot easier because Polk County, despite what you may have heard growing up, was for the longest time, was a purple county.
When you say purple, you mean either one.
Exactly.
And somewhat now, I guess, in a sense, right? I mean, for a while they were Democrat, now they're Republican.
Yes, and they're still a mystery because they can vote for Donald Trump 80% and they elect a Democrat Register of Deeds. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's wild down there. But
Now, what about Ducktown?
oh yeah.
I mean, is that because where the Good Government League was meeting was between the two?
Their initial meetings before they actually made it official was in the Greasy Creek area, the mountains, up above Reliance when they decided to be kind of secretive. But it drew from both sides.
Where would they meet? Do you know?
All I know is they met somewhere way up in the woods, and they had to, their first few meetings, they had to take a lantern to go find somewhere to meet away from the moonshiners, because the moonshiners were paying off Biggs, leave them alone. But then they, eventually met at the Ducktown School, which is now called Kimsey Ridge, a privately owned event center. And you know this, I don't, but Polk County is a tale of two counties. It's got below the mountain, which is Delano, Benton, Ocoee, Old Fort, Conasauga, and even Reliance and all
And
that.
Benton Station.
Yeah, and Benton Station,
Yeah.
and Linsdale and Parksville and all
Yeah.
that. And then you have above the mountain, the Copper Basin of Copper Hill, Ducktown, Isabella, Postel, and then a little farther up where they're, it's not in the Copper Basin, but it's still above the mountain. You have Turtletown and you have Foreigner.
Hanging Dog? Is there a Hanging
That
Dog?
is actually North Carolina,
Okay.
real close to the state line, yeah. And the two sides of the county cannot be more different. And it's like that today. And that River Road, Highway 64, the Onondaga River is what connects them. And that's not convenient at all. And when one side of the county wants something, the other side wants something, that's how it was back then. But all the political power still is in Benton today, but back then the tension was a lot worse because the copper basin had the copper industry, which is now gone. But back then, the copper industry was the biggest taxpayer in the county. Tennessee Copper Company employed hundreds of people.
During Rott's time.
Well, yeah, actually a little after Rott's time. Julius Rott's the guy, oh yeah, he came on your
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
Yeah, he was the guy who first got copper mining really going in Polk
Right.
County, but then he died and they didn't have a railroad and it kind of went defunct for a while. Then it got revived after he died and they finally built a railroad to connect Reliance to the Copper Basin. And then the Copper Company was formed after some mergers around 1899 and that was a huge employer. And they had not just miners, they had all sorts of scientists helping make sulfuric acid and a whole lot of other things. And they were really resentful of the fact that Benton had all the political power and got a lot of the money over there. And then when you throw Birch Biggs into the mix, you know, a sheriff like that, the Copper Basin, they hated his guts. So a lot of GGL support came from the Copper Basin, but a lot of the GGL support was also below the mountain, but they just weren't as open about it because Birch Biggs, you know, lived right next door. So.
Was he a rough hombre?
Yes, he was. He's a very fascinating man. He's the kind of person who he was great with people. He was affable, friendly, and warm. He knew how to make friends easy. He went to church. He passed around the hat if somebody needed some charity, like if their home burned down or if someone died unexpectedly. You know, he could show some compassion, but behind closed doors, in the political world, in the world of being, you know, policing, he was a cutthroat. He had tons of power, and if you got on his bad side, to quote someone from my book, you know, you're liable to get killed. He was not going to put up with any dissension or anyone trying to take his power from him. And I really think the power consumed him. And he was capable of doing horrible things, and especially the men he hired as deputies and some of his other lieutenants or associates. They did some horrible things to people in Polk County, and that's why he was so hated, but not as hated as you would have imagined, because he was so good with people. And some people still couldn't quite figure out how he could live these dual lives and compartmentalize his political corruption and brutality from his persona at church and out on the town square being nice to all the kids. It just fascinates me.
Wonder what the reason was.
I think that someone like him,
Can you see it in his face?
oh yeah, I could see it.
Can you see that, Gwen? Birch Biggs.
Yeah,
What era did he get thrown out? 19 what?
1948, and he had been sheriff off and on in the 1900s, but from 30 to 48, 18 years, he ruled that place with an iron fist, had absolute power.
Now, what made you want to land on him?
Well, I'm from Athens, and the Battle of Athens is fascinating, and I believe that the most recent book, The Fighting Bunch, that came out a few years ago, finally told the true story, and that's my opinion. But this story is so similar. This story was set up by the Battle of Athens, and it's an untold story, and it shows you how power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and it shows you how local government back then, because of the way the Constitution was in the state, could be abused. There were a lot of long overdue reforms that had yet to take place, and there were a lot of archaic parts of our state government that he took advantage of. Wasn't the first, wasn't the last, but he did it very well. And to see someone have that much power, to have the power consume them, I don't think these people are born bad or they set out to do bad things. It's just they have this power and they don't want to lose it. So they're willing to do horrible things to hang on to the power and to the money and to the influence. I think that's part of what it is. As long as you're not getting in the way of his power or his money, he don't have a problem with you.
So now during that era, there was, I guess, voter fraud, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And now didn't they have a shootout there in Benton
You mean in 1948?
during the election or something?
What made Polk County different is the Battle of Athens had no casualties. All the key ballot boxes were taken to the jail in Athens, and whenever they got the fair count, they proved that the GI ticket won.
Right.
Polk County was different. First of all, you had 3 people die that day. But rather than all the ballot boxes being taken to one place,
Now that day, which day? The same day as the Battle of Athens?
2 years later,
2 years later.
1948.
So
when Polk-
it was happening again.
yes, at
Just a different county.
rather than the Biggses taking, because they appointed all the election workers, taking all the ballots to the jail in Benton, the Turtletown precinct had 2 killings, and the Ducktown precinct had 1 killing. And we'll never truly know what happened because some people wouldn't talk, and obviously some people lied. But clearly, something happened to where some of these GGL people, I'm not excusing what they did, but something happened where they thought ballot boxes were going to be taken from the Copper Basin precincts, Turtletown, Ducktown, Copper Hill, to Benton. So they're like, we're going to stop this before it even gets to a battle. And that's when to quote this one guy who is deceased, but thankfully somebody interviewed him before he died, that's when the killing started, when they tried to take the ballot boxes in 1948.
Now, maybe they weren't going to do it. Maybe they just thought they were, right?
It could be, yeah, very well could be. But going by the Biggses track record, you know, you kind of have to wonder. But unfortunately, there were killings, and the 3 of them have never been solved to this day. I've spoken to the families of the deceased, and they have no idea.
Nobody ever looked into it? No district attorney's office?
Oh, no, sadly, no. Beecher Witt, who preceded, Jerry Estes and Steve Crump and Steve Bebb, he's a good DA, but he never did poke this beehive. He didn't.
So he was the DA during that period? Mm-hmm. So he would have been the DA over Ducktown and Turtletown?
Mm-hmm. He never really touched it, sadly. So, and whenever they did investigate, it went nowhere. People, you won't believe the most tight-lit people on this planet are Polk Countyans back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and even really into the 60s, because there were more killings, in the GGL era. And, they could be on their deathbed, their families could be at witness protection with the, millions of dollars in the bank account, and they will not tell you anything. And I sort of understand it. I mean, they're tired of the killing, like it's got to stop sometime, but I also think, don't you want the families to have some closure? Don't you want to know who did this, even if it's just some contract killer from who knows where, but they just won't tell. So you got to put it together as best as you can.
So when were they in Polk County, were they taking the ballot boxes to the jail?
Yes, the transport. That's one of many ways Biggs always stole elections. Was of course he had his guys working there, and they would count outside of public view, which is illegal, and they would stuff them. But also, when the ballot boxes were taken from the Copper Basin, those 3 precincts, they were taken on the River Road, and a lot of times they just dump them into the Ocoee River, and they had a whole new box of ballots stuffed with votes for the Biggs machine for the Democrats, and they took that on to the jail. Well, in 1948, the GGL said, you're not going to get away with that this time. And the GGL had some muscle. You're not going to get rid of Birch Biggs with the Girl Scouts. No offense to the Girl Scouts, but you're going to have some guys with hair on their chests who may be thugs themselves, but hey, these thugs are going to help me get rid of the big thugs, so let's bring them in. Playing with fire here, GGL. Well, they had those guys help them.
Where do they come from, the guys?
Oh, they come mostly from the Copper Basin. The mining people, those were rough guys. I mean, they had to be, and they had those guys help them because after those 3 killings, the next morning, before the National Guard came in, the GGL leader, Bob Barkley, who wrote the book back in Rott's time, he got the muscle to make sure all of the Biggs deputies were disarmed in the Copper Basin, and they had a motorcade of 2 cars taking the Ducktown and Copper Hill boxes to Benton. And they had guns in the car ready for anything, and those were key because they knew Biggs was going to steal Benton, probably did. But if you can get Ducktown and Turtletown, or Ducktown and Copper Hill, you've got it.
Because there was as much of a population.
Yeah, and they hated Biggs, you know, and they were going to win 60-40 on a bad day. And on the way, there was somebody, we'll never know who, some big supporters, perched upon a mountaintop somewhere near the Parksville area. I don't know if it was near Ocoee number 1, probably somewhere around there. And they shot into one of the cars in the motorcade. No one died, someone got their neck cut, but they proceeded on to Benton and put the ballot boxes in the basement of the courthouse. And then by daybreak, the National Guard arrives, and then they're in charge.
Who called the National Guard?
That's a matter of dispute, but I believe it was Birch Biggs' younger son, Birch Glenn Biggs, who a lot of locals may have known as Beefy. He had 2 sons, Broughton and Birch Glenn. Birch Glenn was sheriff at the time. And to show you the stress of this job, he was in the hospital for having a heart attack at age 31. He was not an obese man. He was like an Olympian, World War II veteran, had a heart attack. So his father is his father's really in charge. He's pulling all the strings, but because he's the county coroner, but his chief deputy was a guy in charge on the ground, a guy named Jim Ellis. But the sheriff has to be the one to call the National Guard in.
Why would he call the National Guard if they were the ones if they theoretically were still in the election?
Because he heard rumors. Well, one, he probably assumed correctly that the GGL killed the 3 people, the GGL supporters, not the party guys.
I
the
see.
GGL supporters, the overzealous ones, killed the 3 people in the Copper Basin. And he's hearing rumors. He's getting phone calls. Sheriff, they're getting ready to, have a siege on the jail in Benton.
Yeah.
Now that may have been true, may not have been true.
And maybe they already had the election fixed anyway, and let the National Guard count them because it's already fixed.
They were passing guns out on the courthouse square amongst all the citizens. We're talking about 1,000 citizens literally outside the courthouse that night, waiting for election results. He knew if the National Guard wasn't sent in, so he had to make the call. Now Frank Lowry, his uncle Frank Lowry, claimed he made the call.
Say his uncle, Ben.
Yeah, see, Frank Lowry, the one you talked to, his
Yeah.
uncle was also Frank Lowry.
Right.
And he
So
says he called.
was he related to Biggs?
No, he was
No.
a GGL supporter, Frank Lowry.
So he says he called. Frank says his father called.
He probably did call, but that's not what made it happen because he didn't have the authority. Now, he's trying to help. There's nothing wrong with that. But the sheriff had to make the call, and Sheriff Birch Glenn Biggs called, and then they sent in the National Guard to restore order and the Highway Patrol. And that's interesting because the National Guardsmen, we're talking about 18-year-old kids barely out of high school.
Yeah.
Some World War II veterans, some future Korean War veterans, they're sympathetic to the GGL, who are a lot of veterans.
Who had an issue in Athens 2 years prior.
Yeah. Highway Patrol comes in. They're sympathetic to the governor, Governor McCord, who is a puppet of Ed Crump, the boss in Memphis. They're sympathetic to the Biggses in the sheriff's department. So there was some tension there. But thankfully, the National Guard had ultimate authority. Over that weekend, they restored order by searching not all, but most homes and other dwellings to make sure all the guns were confiscated temporarily. Imagine Polk County's giving up their guns now.
I bet they didn't get them.
They did not even close, but they pretended they did,
Yeah.
but they didn't. But they confiscated a few hundred guns.
Was the GGL and Biggs's machine all surrounding the courthouse during this era?
Yeah.
It's a wonder they didn't break out shooting then.
That night, there were big supporters and the GGL supporters. And when they heard people being killed above the mountain in the Copper Basin, the newspaper said it's a miracle there wasn't a fight then. But they stayed calm enough, waited till morning, and the National Guard came in, and then that's when things finally got calmed down. And they had the vote count on Monday. Very, very interesting, that vote count, because you had 5 GGL representatives, 5 Democrat representatives, 3 journalists, and 3 election commissioners. One of them was Birch Biggs' nephew. I'll get me started on that. So there's 16 guys, right? Then you have a National Guardsman with a fixed bayonet escorting all of them. 32 men in that upstairs courtroom counting those ballots. And of course, it's not a spoiler because everyone knows Biggs eventually got defeated. One of my favorite parts of this book, they're going through all these ballots, huge boxes, and they're not sure what they're going to do because the Ducktown and Copper Hill boxes, Well, they weren't brought by the election workers. They were brought in by the GGL guys. And they're complaining about that, even though Biggs' deputies were election workers bringing them to Benton the past 18 years. No one had an issue with that. So then you have Bob Barkley, the GGL leader who's also an author, a copper company executive, a very strong personality on one side of the table. And then you have Hoyt Lillard, who was Birch Biggs' nephew and an election commissioner. He might as well have been with those 5 Democrats. And Bob Barkley says, "Are you going to certify these returns, Mr. Lillard, or aren't you?" And then Hoyt says, "I don't know. I want to do what's right and what is legal." And then Barkley says, "All you want to do is what they've ordered you to do." And then thankfully, the 3rd election commissioner, a guy who's not from Polk County, because you had the Republican guy who had no power, you had Hoyt Lillard, and then you had a guy named C.C. Gear from Sparta, Tennessee. The Biggs brought him down there to be county attorney. Now, I talked to a 100-year-old, or a man who's 101 years old named Ralph Painter down in Chattanooga. Great man, World War II veteran. He said that Gear, he wasn't crook enough to stay in Benton very long. He was actually kind of a decent human being. He cast the tie-breaking vote in that election commission and said, "We need to go ahead and certify the returns on the basis of what we have here. And if anybody doesn't like what happens, then we can just have them file it in court. You know, they can file an election contest in court." And thankfully, when he did that, the returns were certified, and Biggs was finally out of power after 18 years. If he hadn't done that, they would have. There's no telling what would have happened. Like they would have been counting a whole other day, and the National Guards might have had to.
How much did Biggs lose by?
He lost by about. The GGL got maybe high 50s. He got low 40s. I don't even think that's true. I think they stole it in Benton.
50
that
votes?
Day. No, 50%. Like the GGL got 57-ish%, and the Democrats got 43-ish%.
And who even knows if that was right? The GGL might have packed those ballots.
Well,
who
actually,
knows?
I thought of that myself, but I don't think they did. And here's why. If you look at the precincts breakdown throughout the county's history, before Biggs, during Biggs, and for 1948, you will see that the GGL won by a believable margin, including in Turtletown, where 2 guys were killed because the Biggses were allegedly going to steal the ballot box. The Democrat election workers had custody of that ballot box all day. That's been confirmed by multiple people in oral interviews. The Democrats won that precinct 60-40, but the GGL won the Copper Hill and Ducktown precinct 60-40. And yes, they were in GGL possession all day. So if the GGL was going to stuff it, why make it 60-40? Why not make it 70-30 or 80-20 or 90-10? Because Biggs in his peak during World War II, 1942, 1944 elections, he's winning elections by 98%, which is impossible. And people have told me, well, you know, he fed the poor people with his, he had a big white-faced cattle farm. You know, the Chilhowie glider port, the Super Sod. They're both in my index, so I can give them a shout out.
Were they all, was that Biggs' property?
Yeah, all that was Biggs' farm. He had all these white-faced cattle.
On the courthouse square at 30 2nd Street is the law firm of Logan Thompson Law. Since 1965, they have served the legal needs for the good citizens of Cleveland-Bradley County. If you've got a problem, they're no problem. Give them a call.
Isn't there a Biggs Road?
Yeah, but there's different branches of the family. Yeah. But he gave some beef to some poor families. I won't doubt that. But to make me, you're not going to convince me that's how he got 90% of the vote. If you're giving away that much food to get that many votes, how is your farm profitable?
Well, and
Doesn't add up.
when you know the people that was in the Good Government League, the people that I know, and assuming they were probably, you know, I'm with them because I know the Lowrys and I know the Lees, and they're not going to be involved in nothing nefarious.
Exactly.
But what happened then?
Well,
Was that 1948 or 50?
1948. Yeah. See, that's the end of Volume 1, because this book here, The Big Machines Volume 1, because the sequel will be The Good Government League of Polk County, Tennessee. It's going to cover 1948 to 1965.
So they were involved during that. They were a force. They were actually the Good Government League was in that. Boy, they really did good, didn't they?
They were in power as a cohesive, potent unit for about a decade. Well, a little, maybe 12 years. In the last few years, they kind of started to fizzle out and lose support. But they had some hiccups, unfortunately. And they, like I said, they made their bed with, if you make a deal with the devil, he's going to come, you have to pay your dues. But once they got past all that in the early 50s, a lot was with what Frank Lowry went through, with some more election controversy and another murder. Murder number 18 is counting at this point.
So that will be in Volume 2?
Volume 2, yes. The August Lewis murder. And if you go down Highway 411 into Benton from Etowah, and you're almost at the red light, you've got the Sonic on your left, and then that Circle K gas station, and then on the right there's that building that's like about to fall in on itself.
Yep. Kind of down in the hole?
That's August Lewis's store. See, his daughter's deceased, and his son-in-law owns it. He inherited it and doesn't do anything with it. But August Lewis, that poor fellow, was killed over politics, and his store is still there, about to cave in on itself. And he's probably the most famous murder below the mountain. The most famous murder above the mountain would be Lewis Wright and Bob Rogers. They were ambushed in 1958. And we don't know who killed these people. Some people say they know. They won't tell me. That's fine. That's their right. But they're unsolved to this day. And they were politically motivated killings during the GGL era. GGL gets blamed for this. And that's, I'm not saying they're totally innocent because, you're going to have to fight fire with fire. But they came into a hornet's nest, and the hornet's nest you're not going to be able to kill all the hornets right away, and there's going to be more killings, and that's what Volume 2 will be about, because it did not end. Things got better, don't get me wrong, Biggs was out of there, but there's still a lot of issues to work out, because that place, the culture had just gotten to be solve problems through violence.
Well, and Biggs is, I'm assuming the Biggs machine isn't, I'm assuming they're thinking they'll get back in the next election. Or something, right?
I thought that, but no, they didn't try. Now,
were they just done?
They were done. Some of the remnants, some of his old lieutenants, not his family, got back a Democratic Party. They didn't really get much done. They tried, but no, he just kind of took it easy. And his family, he still ran his mouth. There was a congressman from Knoxville who he received letters from people in Polk County despite not being from that district. And but they weren't going to write to Estes Kefauver because Estes Kefauver was Birch Biggs' cousin, by the way. They were very close. But Congressman Jennings fought Biggs in Congress. He couldn't do much with the Democratic president, but he tried. Well, Jennings lost his primary in 1950 to Howard Baker Sr. And Birch Biggs sent him a telegram. Congratulations on your defeat. Now the people of the 2nd District have noticed and finally learned you have failed them completely. He's a jerk. Birch Biggs was a jerk. I guess Jennings had it coming because Jennings insulted Biggs, but Biggs had it coming too. And then when August Lewis was killed and the county almost went into anarchy, when Frank Lowry was still in the GGL trying to clean up that mess in the legislature, Birch Biggs stood in the courthouse just smiling and said, "Now that's what would happen if I was still in charge of the county." And then when Frank Clement came to town, see, any winning horse, he'd hitch his wagon to that winning horse. Gordon Browning was a war hero, both wars. But then 1952, everyone's kind of getting tired of him. He's old, it's time for him to go. Then Frank Clement comes along, the father of Congressman Bob Clement. Frank Clement's 32 years old, young hotshot lawyer, World War II veteran, FBI, Ivy League, I think an Ivy League degree. A very intelligent man. He's elected governor. So he comes to Benton and he gives a speech at the courthouse and says, "I'm going to catch August Lewis's killer." And then Birch Biggs is almost dead. He walks, By George, so you're going to be the next governor of Tennessee. Good to meet you." Just trying to get and go with the future governor. And then no one to talk about August Lewis's death. The governor couldn't get anybody to talk. And this is the former FBI agent we're talking about here. So Clement makes a campaign promise. "I'm going to catch August Lewis's killer. Those GGLs are a rotten bunch." No one to talk. So he hires an airplane to drop leaflets over Polk County. $5,000 reward for August Lewis's killer.
Golly.
Guess who did a story on that?
Who? Is that right?
That's Nellie. Now, that's not in the book because it's too episodic, it's too singular, But yeah, she did a story on that. So they would not talk, even for $5,000. And then Biggs died in 1954. right here in Cleveland. He died at the, it was at the time it was called the Bradley County Memorial Hospital. Now it's a Nova over there, I guess on Chamberlain. Is that right?
Yeah.
He died at that hospital at the age of 80.
In 1954?
1954. Yep. Yeah.
How old was he?
80 years old.
80 years old.
And then
So
Boston.
he was 77, 78 during this.
Oh yeah.
Sep-
He would have kept it going. Him and his sons kept rotating to get around term limits. He would have been there until he died if they hadn't thrown him out.
Who was the sheriff that won? What was his name?
John Edwards. John Edwards was the most honest man you ever met in your entire life.
Was that Joe Edwards' relative? I wonder.
I don't believe so. He has a son, Bill Edwards.
Because there's a lot of Edwardses over there.
Yeah. See, he was from Silco.
Silco,
He
yeah.
lived all around.
Yeah.
But, see, he was candid. He admitted to having been a moonshiner back in his younger days. You know, and he was a CCC foreman. He was a carpenter. He did a little bit of everything. And the GGL got him because he was a Democrat. He was a World War I veteran, honest, no nonsense. And he got a lot of blame for a lot of the early GGL problems. But really, and he did make some mistakes, but who could have nipped all that in the bud the first few years? It was just, it was a disaster area. The guy was going to have some problems. And they ousted him from office. Now, the biggest should have been ousted from office. But back then, you could do this thing called an ouster suit. You can still do it now. Dick Pelly tried it with Bo Perkinson in Athens, if you recall that last year.
I remember hearing that, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a whole different story. But
Yeah.
this was for criminal stuff, you know. And never announced it on Birch Biggs, heaven forbid. But John Edwards, we're going to oust him. So he gets ousted from office, which is ridiculous. Now,
From the sheriff's office?
office, yeah, 1951. So then
So he's only been in office 3 years.
yeah, and then the county court, GGL controlled county court, they decide they're going to appoint his wife as the sheriff. She's to date the only woman sheriff in Polk County history. And guess who she hires as her first chief deputy?
Who?
Her husband, John Edwards. Love it.
Well, that's a. So they ousted him. They had to get they got his wife to be the sheriff, and she hired him as deputy, and everybody thinks normal.
And then 1952, he's reelected and elected again in his own right. And then we have a period of stability, finally, for about 6 years until Lewis Wright and Bob Rogers are ambushed. So, yeah.
When they were ambushed during during Edwards' reign.
Bud Payne was sheriff.
Oh.
Yeah, his son Frank Payne was sheriff in the 80s, but Bud Payne was from Copper Hill. He was a sheriff, and they were ambushed just outside of Ducktown. Somebody called in a fake police report, and they went right to this bar, and then somebody with a rifle killed them. And the person in the car, Carmel Gibson, who died about 10 years ago, he would then become mayor of Ducktown later on, he was with them. He knew who did it. He never, even on his deathbed, he would not tell who killed him. It's unbelievable, the tight-lippedness of these people. But I understand to an extent, but it's just, and they said about Lewis Wright, they said, you know, it was a long time coming because he had been a Biggs deputy and a GGL deputy. And he had made enemies on both sides. Now, was the man an angel? No. Was he a devil? No. Probably somewhere in between. But he made a lot of enemies, and they ambushed him. And then that was really the end of the killings. And then the GGL fizzled out. And then you have the next era, which I'm not going to write about for a long time because it's way too recent. And that may actually get me shot. This won't, I don't think. It's been long enough. But the most recent era, yeah, I need to stay out of that. It's a little too recent. So, but
Yeah, this was getting into stuff nobody wants to talk about.
yeah, people still living. So when the GGL disbanded in 1965, I'm done with this for a while. So
Now, you mentioned Bob Barkley. He wrote the book on Rod. So he was a big executive there.
yeah, the
And
Copper
an
Company.
author who wrote about Rod. Where was he at in this Biggs machine versus the GGL? Which side was he on?
Barkley's an interesting character. Readers will find out what happened with his family at the beginning of the book, but let's just say his family was no stranger to Polk County violence and politics, okay? But he's mostly an apolitical guy. He ran for he ran for trustee as a Democrat in 1930. He was a lifelong Democrat, and he lost. That was the same year that Birch Biggs was elected sheriff. That's back when, the county would have maybe like half the ticket went Republican, half the ticket went Democratic, and it was so fair. Well, then Barkley doesn't really do anything in politics for a while. He's on the draft board, then he resigned because he got tired of driving from Copper Hill to Benton on that old, lousy dirt road or whatever.
Kinsey Highway?
Well, no, the other one, the 64, but it was
okay.
still a lousy road. And then doesn't say much of anything. And when he does, it's just, oh yeah, Democrat, Biggs is great. Yeah, of course, you're not going to make the, the villain mad. But there was a turning point. There were a few turning points. Have you ever heard of a Ripper bill?
No.
Well, we don't have them anymore because we have home rule. Cities and counties can do what they want within reason. But back then, the state government could literally pass a law that would rip out duly elected county commissioners or city council members or city boards of aldermen, even school board members, and put in the legislation, write in their replacements. Totally undemocratic. Well, Copper Hill was giving Birch Biggs a lot of trouble. So in 1943, he sends his son Broughton Biggs into the legislature. I'm sure he won that election fairly, right? And then he passes a bill not only to do the same thing in Cleveland, did it to the Bradley County government, they got mad. But Copper Hill's government was totally, completely rehauled and packed with Biggs men. Some say that's when Barkley started to realize this is the problem. But then 1946, the schools are in terrible shape. I mean, there was this thesis I found about Polk County schools in 1941, I believe. And it was a Polk County native who did a report on how the schools were in awful shape. They weren't being kept up, and a lot of the teachers the best teachers were being kept in Benton, and they give the not so good teachers, to the Copper Basin. Benton got the center of everything. And his son's school, the rain, heavy rain one day made the roof cave in, and then another day they had to send him home because there was no heating in the school during the winter months. And he wrote an open article in the Copper City Advance talking about how we need to fix these schools, we need to have better government, but he wouldn't quite blame it on Birch. Then the Battle of Athens happened, and all of a sudden Bob Barkley is like, let's take him out. It gave him just a whole lot of courage. You know what he called it?
What?
He wrote in his diary, a second Declaration of Independence in Athens. He knew he could get a coalition, just like in Athens, of veterans from both parties to take out Biggs. And his diary was donated by his late son, Bobby Barkley Jr., who was mayor of Copper Hill till probably the 2000s. His diary on August 1st, 1946, he says, the Cantor machine was thrown out in the Battle of Ballots, the Battle of Ballots and Bullets in Athens. I'm paraphrasing. This seems to mark the end of machine politics in McMinn County, and I hope everywhere else. So then Barkley gets back into politics, and he was a great speaker. I mean, you want to talk about those, I'm just using the description, the people who, the preachers under a tent revival, the real fire and brimstone type preachers. That's what he was like. He was he's a little 5'7", balding, gray hair, glasses, but he was a force of nature. And he got those guys riled up, and he had to recruit some muscle. But yeah, he's a fascinating figure in this because he was a Democrat. So that throws a wrench in the whole argument about how, this is just Republicans wanting back in. No, not at all. This is bipartisan, and Bob Barkley led it. And I think he did a good job for the most part. And his papers he left in Nashville were pretty helpful. But the really, really good stuff, I'm afraid his son threw all that out. The real juicy stuff, unfortunately. But
so it's nowhere to be found, I guess, that stuff. Some of those old notes.
Yeah, some of the real interesting notes are nowhere to be found. But he did leave some pretty good notes on some election results and some letters with certain people in Nashville to kind of put things into perspective and things like that. It was really helpful because that's a good primary source to have. You want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, or for people who lived it, or people whose maybe their father told them stories, and you always have to verify. Because I had people call me, oh my gosh, I put ads in the Polk County News. People call me with the craziest stories.
What do you put ads in saying, if you know anything about this, give me a call?
Well, I just explained who I was in my previous work and say I'm doing a book on the Biggs machine. And, well, no, I didn't call it. I want to appear objective, the Biggs organization and the Good Government League. And, email me, give me a call if you have any information from your family or maybe you remembered it. People would call me with all these stories, and some were true and some were out there, and I couldn't verify them. And some were just completely outlandish. I didn't even give them the time of day. But you've got to really be sure you verify these things. And unfortunately, some authors in the past have not done that. And that's a
Yeah,
problem.
because it would help to have some stuff in there that was colorful,
Yes.
even if it's not true, but you can't do that and be
Yeah, like
good conscious.
I've printed some things, like in this book, there's a few things about Biggs that are flattering. I don't believe them, but I put them in there to be fair. And there are some things about Biggs that probably are true. They're a little harsh, but since they came from a legitimate, honorable person I trust, I put it in there. But if I heard that same thing with somebody else, I'm not going to quote that crazy guy, because that crazy guy is just trying to stir up trouble.
So as a writer, you got to use your own discretion on what's real and what you can put in there and what you feel like you
Yes.
can verify.
Yeah, there are ways to verify. You can use other primary sources. You can use newspapers. You can use the accounts of other people who've proven to be trustworthy, and just basic common sense. Things have to match up, you know.
Are you a big reader outside of? I mean, have you read
yes.
for a lot?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Rick Bragg?
Rick Bragg sounds familiar.
He's a real good author. He wrote Ava's Man.
Is he a novelist?
No, he's what does it mean? Nonfiction.
Oh, not actually.
Yeah.
I'll have to check him
Like
out. Okay.
Ava's Man and all over but the shouting.
I'll check
It's
those
really
out.
good. Your work it really is a lot like his. And
Okay.
what little I know about being an author, but I've seen some similarities in what you're writing and what he's written. He's really, really pretty famous.
I'll check it out.
Do you think you're going to do this? You're going to look for other areas to write? I mean, you ever go down the road and say, boy, I'd like to write about that?
Well, other than Volume 2, I have a few other ideas. Nothing's really set in stone, but an idea I had was Monroe County has a really interesting legal history. Now, there's a lot of lawyers in America, but not enough to really, be a fan base for you to make you rich. But Monroe County has produced some remarkable lawyers. I thought maybe doing just like a series of essays about them, because you have Harry T. Byrne, W.E. Michael, who, by the way, is the father of Van Michael, who's the guy who pretty much got the lawsuit started in Sweetwater. And then you have Ashes Kefauver, almost vice president. Well, not really, but and birthday's cousin, by the way, so that's interesting. Beecher Witt, the longtime DA, and then you had another guy, I think Tom Taylor, then Richard Fisher, and then Jerry Esses and the rest. And who else they have up there? Ray Jenkins. Now, lawyers have egos, not all of them, but this guy, when you give yourself your own nickname, you're a little bit too egotistical. The Terror of Tellico Plains. Oh, he's so famous because he took down Joe McCarthy. Give me a break. But still, he's a famous lawyer from Monroe County. Sue K. Hicks. He helps prosecute the Scopes trial. He becomes a very famous criminal court judge. He presided over some Polk County murders, and not his fault the juries were stupid or bribed or,
Yeah.
And then you have, there's just more I'm forgetting, but maybe something on the Monroe County lawyers, are really remarkable attorneys up there. And then another one, this would take me 25 years, but I really want to do a book, and I could get off on a tangent, but about the myth of the party switch. You've heard that myth that, all the racist Democrats after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed became Republicans overnight. And that's just not true. It's so oversimplified, and there were a lot of things. Well, more Republicans voted for that law than Democrats. Only one guy switched parties. It was Strom Thurmond. The rest stayed in the Democratic Party. But the reason why the South became Republican is not because of that. That was a long, gradual process over many other issues, a lot of economic issues and foreign policy issues. And I love to be able to debunk that and use Tennessee as a case study because, okay, party switch after 1964, look at Goldwater won the South and all that kind of stuff. And then look at Nixon's Southern strategy. It's like, okay, yeah, Nixon may have had an advisor who said something about we got to get the votes of the Southern racists. Yeah, but that doesn't mean it was a party switch. And here's one easy way to debunk this is everyone's focused on presidential politics, and it's important, but there's so much is ignored in state and local government. Let's look at Tennessee. We didn't elect 2 consecutive Republican governors until 2018 because we rotated. We had Democrats serving 2 terms and Republicans going back all the way to 1970, I believe.
McWhorter.
Yeah, McWhorter was in there. Bredesen was in there. Pardon me, Ray was in there. All right. And then you had a Democrat senator. Al Gore was our Democrat senator. Al Gore Jr. in the 1980s, and another guy in the 90s. Our 5 of our non-congressmen were for Democrats until the 2010 midterms, that Republican wave. Well, let's look at Georgia. Georgia did not elect 1 Republican governor until 2002. It was Nathan Deal. No, Sonny Perdue, then Nathan Deal, then Brian Kemp. Let's look at Kentucky. You know, they've never elected 2 consecutive Republican governors ever. It's always been rotated. The point I'm trying to make here is that if you look at the South from 1964 to about 2000-ish, all those states had, most of the time, had Democratic governors, 2 Democratic senators, majority congressional delegations were Democratic, and their state house was Democratic. Tennessee state house Democratic to 2011. There was no party switch. It was a realignment that happened over decades, over a lot of different issues, and I'd love to be able to write something about that.
So it's just a slowly migrate, and then all of a sudden there's just a tipping point that just causes it to go the other direction.
Yes.
Because see, like a lot of the Democrats to the Republicans today are what I used to describe as the Democrats before. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like maybe a Reagan Democrat. And wasn't that a term? Like a Reagan Democrat, middle of the road. Probably what the Good Government League was at the time.
Exactly.
In the middle of the road. I wish we had 3 parties and when you didn't have to choose just one or the other.
That would be nice.
Because that really forces you to join a tribe.
It does.
And people, I know Democrats and Republicans today, the only reason they're Democrats or Republicans is because their great-grandfather was. And they're just not going to switch, and even if the party even thinks different. Doesn't make much sense, does it?
Yeah. There's those ties in McMinn County, Polk County. You can show them the platform of the party changing on both sides. They just won't
It just doesn't matter.
hear anything of it. It's like, well, I mean, what can you say, you know? But
Isn't it funny that you go to church and you believe this way, you worship this way, and you believe the Bible this way, and then you go to the politics and you believe it this way, and it just depends on. And then they're all some are for this football team and that football team. So people try to be in groups and stick with that group, but it's interesting to me how when those groups start to mesh over in the other worlds, how it can really create problems.
yes.
I mean, take the Civil War. They were going to church, and his son's fighting for the North, and his son's fighting for the South. How do they sit in church and sing when their kids are going to be fighting tomorrow? It doesn't make sense.
No, it's wild. I mean, you heard about the Mason meetings back then? I've been told that they would go to the Masonic Lodge and they would take off all their weapons and go inside. The Union and Confederate soldiers go inside and do the Mason meeting or the ceremony, whatever, the rituals, and they go right back out, put their sword back in and their gun and go back to war.
I believe that. I believe that because it's, and probably a lot of the wars and issues have been solved. And I'm not so certain that some of these issues in Polk County weren't solved in the Masonic lodges because I just know the history. But it's funny how things get. Did you ever watch? Let's see. What was the name of that movie? Fried Green Tomatoes.
I've seen parts of
Boy,
it.
that was a great movie. It has a lot of that type of stuff in it, and how. Do you think that people, when they're in these what I call tribes, you know, they're in this religion and they're in this political party, how can they merge? I mean, even if you're in this religious thing and this political party, and then your daughter marries a guy that's in another political party in another church, you have to somehow or another make these things mesh, or you become the Hatfields and McCoys, which was a real thing.
I think a lot of people need to realize that politics right now seems like it's everything, and a lot of other forces in the culture are making everything political. It doesn't have to be that way. And I wish they would go back and look just a few decades ago to see not everything was political, and people could still, to use the expression, break bread and leave those things at the door. But that seems to be more and more difficult for people now. I don't know why that is. I think it's possible, but with everything being politicized or having some sort of angle that connects to something political or a hot button cultural issue, you're going to run into inevitable problems. And I don't tend to have the solution, but it's challenging.
I think it may have to do with advertisings. If I'm a Republican, I'm going to get more Republican ads and Republican positions and Republican point of views. And if I'm a Democrat, I'm going to get served that, whether it's through social media or what. And you're probably not even looking at the other side. We probably have no idea. If I look at your feed on Facebook or Google, or YouTube, it's probably totally different than mine.
Yeah, it's just the clicks.
And it's the stuff you see it's got to influence you one way or another. No humans is beyond being influenced by the same thing all the time.
It is good to try to get out of the echo chamber and see what the other side thinks. But I think one reason why it's challenging, because we don't have as many good faith actors anymore. You got to look really hard, because I have found some people who have completely different beliefs than me, and I get along with them great. We can have some great discussions, and we do find things that are in common, and we know how to go in certain realms of life and not bring politics into it, and that's great. But for every person like that, there's two or three that just can't separate it. They can't realize that we can enjoy all these activities we do together and talk about things and not bring politics into it. And here's how we do it. And I try to give examples, and they just won't hear it. The lack of good faith actors, you can't come in with an agenda. Even if you really feel like something needs to be said, or you got to get it off your chest, or you want to proselytize, sometimes you just got to wait. You got to pick your battles. You got to know, there's expression, there's a time and a place, and that's. But getting out of your echo chamber is huge. You got to find an accurate representation of the other side, and not misrepresent it when you're talking to them.
Right. And I'm always I've never let politics or point of views get. I could care less how somebody votes or thinks. It just does not matter to me. They may know more than me, and I don't know. I'm gonna vote the way I want to. That's separate. But I'm not one that's going to label you because of the way you vote or think or something else. I really don't care. I've got more interest than to how people vote. But this sort of thing's been going on, like in Polk County or wherever, maybe not to that magnitude, but maybe in other influences, ever since humans have been around. I mean, they've always argued, and I don't know if we're ever going to get out of that. Do you?
Well, we've done well, I think, as a species over the past few hundred years than we obviously did.
For 200 years, well, I mean, going way back in time, I mean, if you thought different, they'd just cut your throat or something. So we have evolved into a calmer, a safer society, but it could go the opposite direction.
I may be overstating this, but for most of human history, it was misery. People are barely getting by. They're toiling. What they call subsistence living, and we finally, we used our minds, and we used a lot of the Renaissance and Enlightenment thinking to raise our standard of living. With capitalism, and now we're really comfortable. And we found ways to work out things without having tribal conflicts. We're working things out diplomatically. And we're going in that direction in some ways, in a good way, but also we're kind of regressing. And I don't know if it's just because, like you said, it's easier to have your opinion validated because of the access to information, like with the internet and social media, but maybe it's something else. I don't think we're inherently tribal people. I mean, we had to be back then to survive in subsistence living, but now I don't think we have to be. And I just think more people need to make the case, make a persuasive case. We don't have to be so tribal, you know. But it's a challenge for sure.
And we get that word from when the Indians were in tribes. I mean, that's what they were. They were tribes in the 12 tribes of Israel. You know, that they were even the Bible grouped them as these are the Levites were what were they? They were like the legal minds of the tribes of Israel or whatever.
I don't think so.
I think that's right. I'm probably messing all that up. But being involved, being in a group, everybody even feels more comfortable in a group.
And I said something about we're more comfortable now.
Yeah.
And again, I may be overstating this, but I think there is some evidence that we're almost too comfortable. Not that I don't want us to, live a high-standard living, but we've got so many problems solved now. We have food on demand. We have clothes on demand. We have an air conditioner. We can exact temperature we want. We just push a button, And now we're almost kind of bored, and we need to find something else, some other conflict, so we argue over senseless political things.
That's a very good thought. I've not thought about that.
And
maybe us as humans, we have to have a certain level of conflict in our lives, and if we don't have it with heat and cold and transportation and money, maybe we'll just argue over opinions.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, and I don't see it getting any better anytime soon, sadly. So
I've never heard anybody think. Did you think of that yourself?
I've heard people say that. Other people I like to listen to, other thought leaders and philosophical people, not just political talking heads. People that give something of truly thoughtful analysis. But that also comes into gratefulness. Like you said, there's inevitably going to be conflicts, but. Look at how good life is now. There's a lot of things that are horrendous right now, for sure. But overall, human-centered living's never been better. There's never been a better time to be alive, and you got to be grateful for that, And you got to be grateful that a lot of these things that I've written about in these books, other people write about in these history books. Any history author has written about those things. Look how bad stuff was then, and look how much better it is now. And just be grateful for it, because we're still doing pretty good, and we know how we can continue to be good. We just got to learn from the past mistakes and dare I say, stick with tradition. Tradition, Thomas Sowell, one of my favorite thinkers, says tradition is just, I'm going to botch this, but tradition is just distilled experiences of humans passed down the line. Distilled meaning we're taking out the bad stuff and we're keeping the good stuff, and that's why they become traditions.
Oh,
you shouldn't
in other words,
you shouldn't blindly follow them. You can ask questions and verify. That's fine, but still, that's why the traditions become what they are, because they work. It leads to a prosperous society. And now some people will want to just thumb their nose at tradition just for the sake of it, and that's unfortunate. That's not going to help.
Because I've heard people say, that's just tradition. It should be, that's tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Like you heard the old saying of the lady that cut the end off of her turkey, and she finally asked her mother because it wouldn't fit in the oven.
Yeah.
But that's something we say as tradition is you don't have to worry about it. It's silly and it's of no avail. But what you're saying is tradition is wear your socks in cold weather and don't these things that are good traditional maybe. That's probably a bad example.
Or the tradition is we've seen what happens when we don't follow the Constitution of this country. We don't have checks and balances. We don't have people that understand civics and how there's a process for all this. And you can argue about your opinion on the issue all day. That's inevitable. But can we all at least agree on the process? This process works. We just got to do it. But now everything's just, unilateral.
And when things ebb and flow from a Democrat office to a Republican office, that's good. It's coming and going, and we're taking the good and making this better and all that. That's good. But when you don't have a process that allows that, then you get one-sided. Mm-hmm. Back to tradition, I remember they used to. Remember on the Beverly Hillbillies, Granny Clampett would open the house and air out the house every spring. That was tradition, right? Maybe that helps for colds or pollen or flus or, that's... I've never thought about traditions like that.
Yeah, some of the, like a home remedy, yeah. I mean, some of them are complete quackery, but some of them work. You just gotta look into it, Don't take it by blind faith. Look into it and verify it, and see what it's all really about.
And maybe some of those home remedies aren't that far off. Maybe we just were doing them wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think that you ever thought about this? I know I'm rambling, but the connection between these books, Biggs, Nellie, and Harry, I guess they never knew each other.
Probably not. Their past would have been close, but Harry wasn't home when she interviewed my great-grandmother,
No.
and Biggs was out of politics, and Harry got back into it in the 40s, so probably not. But they were really close.
Really
They
connected.
had passed each other in the hallway. I mean, of course, everyone knew who Biggs and Harry were, but still, yeah, it's close, but they weren't that... I don't think they ever really met and knew each other. That's true.
Now, there's a good chance they all three talked to the same people.
Absolutely.
Because she would have interviewed somebody that knew him, and he probably would, there's a lot of connections there.
Just to give you one example, Governor Gordon Browning, for sure, would have talked to all these people. Yeah, because he was recruited by Boss Crump to be his puppet, and then turns out he was going to be his own man, so Crump got rid of him, and then he came back 10 years later and beat Crump, with the anti-Crump Democrats, so yeah, it worked out pretty well for Gordon Browning.
Isn't it funny that who wins the office may not be the best for the office, but they may have a better ground game or a better advertising game, or they may be, we may elect the best speaker, but we got the worst person, or maybe this guy was better looking or dressed better or had better posture. You just never know what's going to put somebody. I mean, even the system we got is not even great on that end, is it? I used to remember they used to say, oh, they would have won, but it rained that day and the voters stayed at home. You ever heard that old saying,
Did you hear
would that really matter?
With the Nixon-Kennedy debate in 1960, they said that the radio listeners thought Nixon won, but the TV viewers thought Kennedy, because he's a handsome man, and Nixon had a 5 o'clock shadow, and he was nervous, fidgety, how Nixon was. But yeah, that's true. You can have someone who's really silver-tongued and they can win, and you can have somebody who has some great ideas. It will be an efficient administrator or efficient legislator, executive, but they have the personality of a bucket of ice water.
Right.
And they're not going to get elected that way.
No.
So, yeah, it's hard to find the person who's got it all, like a unicorn.
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? Do you think that 200 years from now we'll still have, our system will look like it does now? Or will it fall off like the Roman Empire and the Till of the Huns and the Vikings? And
I hope it endures.
I mean, are we supposed to think it's going to go on like this forever and just get better and better? Maybe those societies got soft too.
We're certainly getting soft, but if it's left in 200 years, it's going to be just something that people pay lip service to and don't really follow. You know what I mean? It won't be.
They'll look back
It'll be
and
a
read.
name only.
They'll look back and read this book and think, "What in the world were they thinking? I can't believe they had this." Hey, do you realize these people all had probably outdoor bathrooms, outhouses probably at the time?
Oh yeah. I know for sure that Biggs probably born in a old farmhouse, and went out back to use a bathroom, and then he's living to see the age of nuclear war. So, and then my mentor teacher talks about Harry T. Burns born in 1895 when they didn't have electricity at his house. I think they had a toilet though, maybe, but when he died, it's disco fever. The balls coming down from the ceiling.
John
so
Travolta.
that's how much things change in his lifetime. So yeah, it's remarkable.
When you look at even mine, I mean, I remember my grandmother had an outhouse, but that was not common. Everybody had electricity. Everybody had a car. But now, you know, they got TVs, you know, somebody might be watching this from Japan. And we got microwave ovens. Elon Musk is trying to get to Mars.
Yeah.
You can sign up for a trip to go to the moon or whatever that Branson guys
Be
thing.
pricey, but you can do it.
Yeah. So things are really moving, and self-driving cars.
That's a no for me, but yeah.
Wonder what will be next.
Well, according to Back to the
what
Future,
can
we're
it be?
behind, but I don't know.
Teleportation, maybe?
Apparently, the
AI?
you connect your consciousness to like a, what's Neuralink. Elon Musk wants to
Neuralink,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a horrendous idea. So I hope that's not next, but we'll see.
That's helping a lot of people that's paralyzed, though. They're trying.
Oh yeah, that's fine. But also, I'm just worried about the mind reading and consciousness surviving your body. That could be a problem. So. I mean,
yeah, that's unbelievable. Well, even like that chat. What do they call
Chat
that?
GPT.
Yeah, they'll have some of these things you see on the internet aren't even real. They're just taking that and making something up of it.
Yeah, they could just type in, I need a research paper, and some of the high school kids today, sadly, don't even proofread their own cheating, and they just like, as an AI, I can't answer this question. The teacher's like, at least erase that sentence first.
Yeah, take that
You would have
off.
had me going for maybe a minute, but no, I know from the very beginning you cheated. So yeah, I mean, God, you got to put some effort into it.
Where'd you go to college?
UT Knoxville,
What was your major?
history.
History.
Yeah.
What makes you like history so much?
I loved it since 7th grade, but I just love the stories, the things you can learn from it.
Why 7th grade? What's the significance?
I had a great teacher, Travis Tuggle. He teaches at Midland Central now in Inglewood.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had a way of making it interesting and showing how important it is. And he had an enthusiasm, but he wasn't enthusiastic to the point to where it made you sick. He still had some days where he was kind of, in a bad mood, but for a good reason, like he. But the stories you learn, and when I get to teach it, I teach it almost like you teach literature. I've learned that actually helps students learn easier, because hey, you got characters, you got a setting, you got a theme. If you just teach names, dates, and things like that, places, it's not going to work. But and you can talk about everything. I mean, history has all sorts of different subjects. I'm not really into the history of math or the history of science, but the Scopes trial, we discussed history of science right here. Or we're talking about the history of the way the world changed when these people were living their lives, going out back to use the bathroom and not have electricity. Women can't vote, and then when they die, they have all these amenities in their home when there's nuclear war, all the change they saw in their life. And you can connect to everyday life a lot better than you can with, and of course, I more power to the science and math teachers. We need them. They do great work, but God, they talk about making it hard to connect to the kids' everyday life. That's tough, because English and history have an easier time with that than science and math do. But it's got to be done.
What about the old sayings, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes?
I
What
like
does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it means things will happen in a similar way, but it won't be identical. Or it may not happen in full, it happens in part, because it's a major cliche to say history repeats itself. Yeah, because, it's like, oh, time's a flat circle, because everyone expects we're going to have this utopia, but there's all these, if we can get rid of these people or all these, unenlightened people, all times it's a flat circle. We just keep repeating all this stuff. It's like, don't look at it that way. You're waiting for utopia. It's never going to happen. But it will rhyme, because we've seen some things that have happened that were easily preventable. And you can just look back and see something similar that took place, even if the technology is completely different or the settings completely different. Oh, that can't be compared. Of course it can compare.
Do you think a person that really studies history in depth can be a better predictor of things to come?
In some ways, there's certain fields where you really need some expertise. Of course, that's debatable now about experts, but like economists, that's a whole different thing. But when it comes to just how cultures and how countries go and things like that, I think historians could be better at predicting things than the average person. But when it comes to something real specific like an economy or or a certain type of technology, you need to talk to the futurists, about that kind of thing.
Maybe human nature would be more of a history person, what human nature is going to do versus what...
Yes, because that's why we have these governments set up the way we do, because the founding fathers, flawed though they were, they knew human nature. That's why they wanted to separate all this power, and now it's all consolidating into it. And a lot of that, sadly, I don't even think it's just because they want to have their opinion shoved down your throat by one president or one judge. I think it's because it's just laziness.
Well, those guys were smart, weren't they?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Well read. They thought ahead, and despite the flaws they had, they set up a framework to help fix their flaws. They really did. We got to remember that. They left it to us to make it better, and we have made it better, and then we started, going another way. But
are these two books on Kindle or audio?
The first one is available on Kindle. Tennessee Station Harry T. Burns. You can
What about audio? Does that cost a lot to get it on audio?
My publisher doesn't do audio. Yeah, they don't do that.
You would have to read it yourself, and
yeah, that gets pretty pricey. And then this book and the Biggs book are just available in print. Yeah, but I'll talk to the Biggs publisher. We may be able to do something digital or audio. I'm not sure. I guess it depends on how it goes. But yeah, they're all available on my website, tylerlboydbooks.com. You can find them in. You can find Harry T. Burns in any local bookstore, and you can find Nellie at my website. And this book, I'm going to have book signings for the Big Machine. I'm going to have signings all over the place. I'm going to have signings in Benton, Ducktown, Springtown, Etowah, Athens, Cleveland. I mean, all over the place. Postal, maybe. What's left of it, yeah. Maybe
where is Postal?
Postal is a little bit west of Ducktown.
Would that be close to Web Store?
No, that's Reliance.
Yeah, what's above Reliance? If you look on Google Maps, here's Web Store. There's the river, and over to the right it'll say Postal. And I don't know if that's the same Postal.
The train went to Postal. That's why.
Oh.
Yeah, because it stops along the way, but it went to Postal, and then the other side of that town to the east is Isabella.
Yeah.
Which is still sort of has some remnants of existence, whereas Postal is mostly gone. But yeah, the Reliance area is interesting because you have Reliance and you have Springtown, which is above it to the north on 314, I think, or 315. And then up in the mountains, you have Archville, which is the Greasy Creek region of the city. Well, the community is called Archville.
Archville, what's there?
Yeah. I haven't been up there in forever, but it's just a mountain town. They're up on top of the mountain, and it's just very rural and not many people. There's a church up there, just people love being in the mountains, really.
So that's between Archville?
Yeah, Archville's sort of like, if you're taking the Old Kimsey Highway,
yeah.
Archville, I don't know if it's halfway point, but like if you're going for Reliance, you'll stop at Archville and you keep going forever. Eventually you get to Harbach.
What do you do at Archville?
Not much there. I mean, there's a little store and a little church, and there was a school a long time ago. Now they've all consolidated, but there's just not much there.
Is there, what kind of store, like a gas? Can you get gas?
I'm not sure. I haven't been up there in so long, I couldn't tell you. Surely you can, unless they like going down to Web Store. I don't know, but it is remote.
Archville.
I know that, yeah.
Well, how would you like to live in Archville?
And I believe that the zip code is Reliance now. All of that is.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, like that whole part, north middle of Polk County is zip code Reliance, and like the northeast would be Turtletown, and northwest is Delano, and then you get to Benton, and then
I'm fascinated with those
yeah.
old small towns. It really just fascinates me.
And there could be a post office, and then 2 miles later is a whole nother town, a whole nother post office, a whole nother zip code, a whole nother school, a whole nother store.
I don't know them, and they don't know me.
Exactly, yeah. Or they do their thing, we do our thing.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, okay, I'll hop in the car, we'll go to the Walmart in Cleveland, so it's 20 minutes away, which ain't too bad. But back then, that's a haul. I mean, to go that far, because roads were crap, and the cars didn't go very far, and wartime rationing, But Birch Biggs, he had all those parties at Quinn Springs. You know where Quinn Springs is on the way to Reliance? You know where Fort Mawr is, that big wooden fort they have?
Let's see, if you take a ride, take a ride on, like you're going to Web Store. Where is it right when you take a ride?
The Quinn Springs is not far from 411. It's on the way to Reliance.
On the
And
left or right?
on the
left.
left. Well, actually, maybe on the right. I think actually.
There's a little campsite.
Yeah, the little pavilion.
Yeah.
Biggs, during wartime austerity, he had all these barbecues, all this food. You know, it's like he had the way to get all those resources for his political barbecues when most families had to ration all these things. You know?
Was Biggs sheriff? Was it in charge of Reliance or the Webb Store area? Was it Webb Store didn't have? They were just a
They
like
just
Webb.
got started when he got in there in the 30s.
So they were. He took care of. He if you had something happen at Webb Store, you'd have called and you'd have got Biggs' office.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was definitely the sheriff's department. Yeah, and that's where a lot of the unsolved killings happen in the mountains because it's so remote. You know, but they say there's some killings there that they never even identify the victims. You know, so they're not political. Just that people went out
Right.
there and solved disputes and
Right.
killed them, and that's it. So, but
This is very interesting. So tell us how you can buy these books. Give us the website.
Well,
Slow. Say it slow.
TylerLBoydBooks.com, and you can also
Lowercase L, I noticed.
Yes.
Tyler, lowercase L Boyd.
Yes, all the URLs,
Yeah.
are, and domain names. And then on my Facebook, I'm on there as Tyler L. Boyd. And you can find my book's Facebook page. Just type in the title, The Biggs Machine, and the subtitle, Old Time Politics in Polk County, Tennessee. And the profile picture on that Facebook page is Birch Biggs wearing his hat and his glasses, looking every bit the country sheriff. And I post updates there on the book, and the book launch will be in early August, a date to be determined, in early August at the West Polk Public Library right in Benton, in his hometown. I'm sure he loved that. So,
Hey, it's been a real pleasure. I
Oh,
really
yes.
enjoyed
Me
it.
too. I enjoyed it, yes.